that one wanted that. That is a nice fish.
You've probably heard it said before, colors catch fishermen more than fish, and there's definitely some truth in that claim. Now when it comes to the Whopper Plopper, I value sound more than color, but color is also important for making a fast-moving bait stand out. And in order to make a Whopper Plopper stand out, it's important to consider the color behind the color of the Whopper Plopper. In other words, the backdrop. Now this is important because regardless of the situation, a fish will always see the Whopper Plopper in contradiction of a horizontal, diagonal, or vertical backdrop. Like the batter's eye in baseball, most of the time you want to create a distinct color separation between the color of the lure and the color of the background. In baseball, the reason a dark wall is placed behind where the ball is thrown from is so that the hitter can see the ball better. Okay, the first backdrop is the horizontal backdrop. Now you've probably seen a chart like this before, but if you haven't, basically when light enters water, it's absorbed at different wavelengths, which affects colors and brightness. So reds, oranges, yellows, they're filtered out earlier in the water column. In greens, blues, and purples, they remain more visible at deeper, darker depths. Now, obviously a Whopper Plopper is a surface bait and it doesn't descend in the water column. However, colors are also filtered out horizontally and diagonally through the water, so this will also affect the fish's ability to see the color of your Whopper Plopper. So, just like the vertical chart demonstrates, a horizontal plane will also have a similar effect on colors. So likewise, greens, blues, and purples, they're going to be more visible at longer distances, whereas reds, oranges, and yellows will be filtered out at a shorter distance. So for example, if you're fishing a red Whopper Plopper, it's not going to keep its true colors, like the black Whopper Plopper, at a faraway distance. Now, while red could be a key color for that day, a fish may never see it as red until it gets closer, or it may not even be visible at all to that fish. In addition to light factoring into the ability to see the color of a Whopper Plopper, there are also other factors that contribute to making the bait color and appearance less true or hidden, like water clarity. In general, there is a wide range, so I divide the clarities into 4 groups: clear, stained, cloudy, and muddy. In these clear water conditions, light can penetrate deeper, so eyesight will be used more heavily. Because clear water has the least amount of added resistance in the water, colors will appear the most true. In most clear water situations, natural colors like white, black, and bone, or translucent color patterns are often recommended because fish will have the best vision in these conditions. As for stained water, I consider the water to be relatively clear, but it has an obvious dark tea or watered down coffee color tint to it. The technical term is tannic water, but you might have heard folks refer to it as black water or root beer water. While Florida probably has the biggest reputation for stained water, it can be found across the country. And I consider the visibility in stained water to be around 2 to 8 feet. In stained water, lighter or bright colors might excel, like white, bone, and golden. Of course, you can also go darker with a black, which can also be very effective. As for cloudy water, I categorize it as water that has mostly organic matter like microorganisms, debris, and particles from vegetation. If I had to speculate, most of us probably fish in a type of cloudy water system, or we will at least experience cloudy water seasonally. Early in the season, your waters might be dirtier because of snowmelt, rain, flooding, or ecological filtration systems might not just be built up yet. In my opinion, cloudy water will have the most diverse range of colors to it, and the visibility will typically be around 2 to 4 feet. In cloudy water, white, bone, and black are standard colors that can help you offset most conditions. As for muddy water, this is that chocolate milk looking water that a lot of people don't dare to fish. Unlike cloudy water, it is comprised of soil and dirt and has less than 2 feet of visibility. Now, in my experience, the Whopper Plopper can be extremely useful in these conditions because in muddy water, more fish rely on sounds and vibrations. In these conditions, it can be tricky because in most instances, fish will stay tight to cover and not chase your bait. So a lot of the times, I'm going to have to make repeated casts to the same spot, and I like using the loudest Whopper Plopper I can find and match it with an ultra slow retrieve. When it comes to muddy water, a black Whopper Plopper will likely create the biggest contrast and offer the fish the best look. As for matching the watercolor, an example of this would be to use the Yoda Whopper Plopper in muddy water, which would make it much more difficult for a fish to visually locate. As you can see, there's a spectrum of water clarities. Some are easier for fish to see the color and shape of your Whopper Plopper, while others make it much more difficult. There are only 3 outcomes that you can control with the selection of your Whopper Plopper color. The first option is to go darker than the backdrop. The second option is to go lighter than the backdrop. And the third option is to match the backdrop. For the vertical backdrop, there are 2 conditions that we're going to look at: bright light conditions and low light conditions. In bright light or sunny conditions, it is how it sounds. There is great amount of light available, and it's almost always overhead or behind the Whopper Plopper. Now, because the light is behind the Whopper Plopper, there will be a silhouette effect. In general, a silhouette effect is a dark shape against something lighter or brighter. Ultimately, it emphasizes the form of the subject over the color value, like a solar eclipse. Now, this is important for us anglers because details are drastically reduced, so having a realistic looking Whopper Plopper or trying to match the hatch will not be beneficial here. Here's a quick demonstration of how different colors are impacted when the Whopper Plopper is between the fish and the overhead light. As you can see, the black Whopper Plopper has an extremely dark silhouette and it has minimal change. As for the white, it takes on a dark underbelly. And we see this occur routinely with birds and airplanes. Even if they are white, they will have a dark underbelly when they fly overhead and the light is behind them. For clear or translucent colors, as you can see, the translucent has a lot of light passing through it and illuminates it in the water. But the clear Whopper Plopper offers the fish a lot of detail, but it does sacrifice the silhouette effect. The last color is chrome, and as you can see, it's just like the black in the fact that it doesn't allow light to pass through and it becomes extremely dark, and you don't get as much reflection as you might think. In low light conditions, there is a spectrum of shades that can appear during the early mornings, late afternoons, or on those overcast days. You would think that since there is less light overhead, the low light would have a drastic difference. But because there is still light behind the lure, there will remain a silhouette effect. Even in these conditions, the silhouette effect is still present because there's no light coming from beneath the Whopper Plopper. For any color of the Whopper Plopper to be seen, a light source would need to be present for it to bounce off the underbelly of the Whopper Plopper. Okay, let's look at the last backdrop, which is the diagonal backdrop. A diagonal backdrop is the background behind the Whopper Plopper, which is diagonal to the fish's perspective. This backdrop is probably the least significant of the 3 backdrops, but it is a factor that should be considered. Examples of a diagonal backdrop are mountains, or a cliff, or a steep bank, or a bunch of tall trees. It really comes into play the most in tight quarters like a channel or a river or creek, or if you have overhanging trees. So just like water clarity, there are 3 options here as well. You can either go darker, lighter, or match the background. So if I'm fishing a rock wall background, then I'm probably not using gray. Or if my diagonal background is a bunch of trees, I'm probably trying to avoid dark colors like black. Okay, we covered some of the most important concepts when it comes to not just Whopper Plopper fishing, but topwater fishing in general. Remember, this is all very nuanced, but you should have a majority of the tools that you need to combat the conditions you might be up against. Take these concepts, put them in your bag, and apply them to your local conditions and go catch some fish.